The morning sky on Kethvar had turned from blue to orange, then to a deep red that hurt to look at. Elder Silthara stood at the observation deck of the Great Council building, watching their sun grow larger and angrier with each passing day. The star that had given life to her world for millions of years was now slowly killing it. She touched the crystal formations on her arm, feeling them warm against her skin. All Zephyrians had these beautiful crystal growths that covered parts of their bodies. They used to shine bright blue and green in the healthy sunlight. Now they looked dull and gray, just like everything else on their dying planet. Elder Silthara, came a voice behind her. She turned to see young Kexhan, one of the communication operators. His crystals were barely formed, marking him as someone who had just reached adulthood. Still no response from the Galactic Federation. Silthara sighed. For 6 months, they had been sending messages across the galaxy. Every major civilization, every spacefaring race, every government that had the power to help them. The message was always the same. Their star was dying too fast. Their planet would be uninhabitable within a year, and they needed help evacuating their people. 200 million Zephyrians lived on Kethvar. They were a peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They grew food, they made art, they studied the stars, and they raised their children with love and care. They had no armies, no weapons of war, no valuable resources that others might want. They were just ordinary people who were about to die through no fault of their own. What about the Altrurian Empire? Silthara asked. Kexhan shook his head. They sent a formal response this morning. They expressed deep sympathy for our situation, but they say their ships are committed to other important missions. They suggest we contact the Nexus Collective instead. And the Nexus Collective? They say the same thing, but they suggest we contact the Galactic Federation. Silthara closed her eyes. It was always the same pattern. Everyone felt sorry for them, but no one could actually help. There were always other priorities, other commitments, other reasons why saving 200 million lives was just not practical right now. She walked to the communications center, where dozens of Zephyrians worked day and night, sending messages and monitoring responses. The room was filled with screens showing star maps, ship movements, and diplomatic channels. Once, this room had buzzed with excitement as they made contact with new civilizations and learned about the galaxy beyond their world. Now it felt like a tomb. "Show me the latest responses," she said to the chief operator, the screen filled with messages. The Chronari hegemony regretted that their evacuation ships were being used for a military exercise. The Epsilon Trade Union explained that civilian evacuation was not cost-effective unless the refugees could guarantee future economic value. The Stellar Confederacy noted that Kethvar was located in a disputed sector, making any rescue operation politically complicated. Each message was polite. Each message expressed sadness about their situation. Each message ended with the same result. No help was coming. Silthara looked around the room at her people. Some were still young, like Kexhan, their crystals just beginning to form. Others were elders like herself, their crystals fully grown and reflecting years of wisdom. All of them were working desperately to find anyone who would help them survive. "Elder," said another operator, "we have a response from the Vorthan Republic." Silthara felt a spark of hope. The Vorthans were known for their advanced technology and their large fleet of ships. If anyone could help them, it would be the Vorthans. The message appeared on screen. Silthara read it twice, then a third time, unable to believe what she was seeing. The Vorthan Republic acknowledges the difficult situation facing the Zephyrian people. However, our analysis indicates that the resources required for a full planetary evacuation would exceed the strategic value of the operation. We recommend that the Zephyrians focus on preserving their cultural artifacts and historical records for future study. We wish you well in your final days. The room fell silent. Someone in the back began to cry softly. Another operator put his head in his hands. Silthara stared at the message. Strategic value? They were talking about 200 million lives, and the Vorthans were calculating strategic value. "Keep sending messages," she said quietly. "Send them to everyone. Small governments, trading companies, religious groups, exploration fleets. Someone out there has to care." As the days passed, the situation on Kethvar grew worse. The dying star was throwing off massive amounts of radiation and heat. The ice caps had melted completely, causing floods that destroyed coastal cities. The plants that Zephyrians ate for food were dying in the heat. The air itself was becoming hard to breathe. Families began moving underground into the deep cave systems that ran beneath the planet's surface. The caves were cooler and offered some protection from the radiation, but they were not meant to support entire cities. Food was running low. Clean water was becoming scarce. Disease was spreading among the overcrowded refugees. Children asked their parents when the rescue ships would come. Parents had no answer. Silthara spent her days in the caves now, helping to organize the underground settlements. The council building on the surface had become too dangerous as the radiation levels increased. She moved from cave to cave, trying to keep hope alive among her people, even though she was losing hope herself. "Elder," said Kexhan one day, finding her in the medical cave where the sick were being treated, "I have something strange to report." She looked up from the child she was helping, a little girl whose crystals had stopped growing because of malnutrition. "What is it?" "We picked up a signal on one of the old emergency frequencies. It's not from any of the major civilizations." Silthara frowned. "Pirates? Scavengers looking to pick through our ruins?" "I don't think so," Kexhan said. "The signal is crude, not very advanced, and the message is different." They walked back to the communication center, now relocated to a large cave filled with portable equipment. The main screen showed a simple text message, repeated over and over in basic galactic standard language. "We heard your call for help. We are coming. Do not give up hope." Silthara stared at the message. "Who sent this?" Kexhan worked at his console, tracing the signal back to its source. "According to our records, it came from humans." Humans? Silthara had heard of them, but only barely. They were a young species that had only recently developed faster than light travel. Most civilizations considered them primitive and unimportant. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Elder. The signal definitely came from human space." Silthara read the message again. It was so simple, so direct. No talk of strategic value or political complications or economic considerations. Just a promise. "We are coming." She looked around the cave at her people, sick and dying and losing hope. Could this young, primitive species really help them when all the great powers of the galaxy had turned away? The answer came 3 days later, when long-range sensors detected a fleet of ships entering their solar system. Not the sleek, advanced vessels of the major civilizations, but a ragged collection of different ship types, all heading straight for Kethvar. The humans had kept their promise. They were coming. Whether they could actually save 200 million people remained to be seen. But for the first time in months, Silthara allowed herself to hope. Captain Maya Chen stood on the bridge of the converted hospital ship Compassion's Edge, watching the red giant star of the Kethvar system grow larger on the main screen. Behind her, the ship hummed with activity as medical teams prepared emergency treatment centers and engineers worked to modify life support systems for Zephyrian physiology. "Captain," said her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Federation." Maya nodded. She had been expecting this. "Put it through," the screen flickered, showing a dignified alien in the formal robes of a Federation diplomat. "Captain Chen, I am Ambassador Veltok of the Galactic Federation. You are ordered to withdraw your fleet from this system immediately." "Good morning to you too, Ambassador," Maya said calmly. "I'm afraid I can't do that. We're here on a humanitarian mission." "Captain, the Kethvar system has been classified as a hazardous zone due to stellar instability. Your presence here violates multiple Federation safety protocols and territorial agreements." Maya looked at the tactical display showing her fleet, 43 ships in total. Everything from converted cargo haulers to modified passenger liners. None of them were military vessels. Most were privately owned ships whose captains had volunteered for a mission that everyone said was impossible. "Ambassador, with respect, I don't see any Federation ships here helping these people." "The situation has been analyzed by Federation experts," Veltok replied stiffly. "A full planetary evacuation is not feasible given the resources required and the extreme danger posed by the unstable star. The Federation has offered to preserve Zephyrian cultural artifacts for historical study." Maya felt her jaw clench. "You want to preserve their art while you let them die?" "Captain, you must understand the larger picture. The Federation has responsibilities to hundreds of member worlds. We cannot risk valuable ships and personnel on an operation with such a low probability of success." "Ambassador," Maya said, her voice steady and cold, 200 million people are about to die. I don't care about your probability calculations. Captain Chen, your species is young and inexperienced in galactic affairs. You do not understand the complexities of interstellar governance. This emotional response is exactly why humans are not ready for full membership in the galactic community. Maya smiled grimly. Maybe we're not ready for your kind of community, Ambassador. Maybe that's a good thing. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Any word from the surface? Yes, Captain, said Dr. James Okafor, the fleet's chief medical officer. I've been in contact with Elder Silthera. The Zephyrians have provided detailed information about their biology and environmental needs. It's challenging but not impossible, Maya nodded. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation. When the distress signal from Kethvar had reached Earth, the government had debated for days about how to respond. Politicians talked about diplomatic consequences and the cost of mounting such an operation. Military leaders pointed out that Earth's small fleet couldn't handle an evacuation of this scale, but the people of Earth had responded differently. Within hours of the news breaking, volunteers were signing up. Ship captains offered their vessels. Medical personnel took leave from their jobs. Engineers and technicians worked around the clock to modify civilian ships for the rescue mission. The Compassion's Edge itself had been a luxury cruise liner just a month ago. Now its ballrooms had been converted into medical bays, its restaurants into supply distribution centers, its entertainment decks into temporary shelters. Dr. Okafor, Maya said, "What's our capacity? Each ship in the fleet has been modified to carry between 3,000 and 5,000 Zephyrians depending on size." He replied, "We can evacuate about 160,000 people in the first wave. Then we'll need to find temporary shelter for them while we come back for the rest." "The moon," said Navigator Lisa Park. "Kethvar's outer moon has a thin atmosphere and low gravity. We can set up emergency shelters there." Maya studied the tactical display again. 43 ships to save 200 million people. By any reasonable calculation, it was impossible. But humans had never been good at accepting impossible. "Captain," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission. This one's from the Altrurian Empire." The screen showed a different alien, this one with the silver uniform of an Imperial Admiral. "Captain Chen, I am Admiral Zethkar of the Imperial Fleet. We are prepared to offer a solution to the Kethvar situation." "I'm listening," Maya said. "The Altrurian Empire will accept responsibility for the Zephyrian refugees, provided that human forces withdraw immediately and transfer operational control to Imperial authorities." Maya frowned. "What exactly does accept responsibility mean?" "The Empire will relocate the Zephyrians to appropriate worlds within our territory, where they can be properly integrated into Imperial society." "As what? Citizens, workers, slaves?" The Admiral's expression didn't change. "As productive members of Imperial society, contributing their skills and labor to the greater good of the Empire." "No deal," Maya said immediately. "Captain, you should consider this offer carefully. The Empire has the resources and expertise to handle this situation properly. Your amateur rescue attempt is more likely to result in disaster than success. Admiral, these people asked for help, not new masters. We're here to save them, not deliver them to you." She cut the transmission, ignoring the Admiral's protests. "Captain," Dr. Okafor said quietly, "are we doing the right thing? Maybe the Federation and the Empire have resources we don't." Maya turned to look at her crew. They were all young like her. Earth was a young world, and its people were still learning their place in the galaxy, but they had something that the older, more advanced civilizations seemed to have lost. "Doctor," she said, "when you see someone drowning, do you stop to calculate the cost of the rope before you throw it?" He shook his head. "Then we're doing the right thing." The fleet entered orbit around Kethvar 6 hours later. The planet below was a dying world, its surface scarred by massive storms and radiation burns. But thermal scanners showed millions of life signs in underground cave systems, and every one of those signs represented someone who was counting on them. "All ships, this is the Compassion's Edge," Maya announced over the fleet communication channel. "We didn't come this far to do the easy thing. We came here to do the right thing. Let's bring these people home." The response from the fleet was immediate and unanimous. 43 captains, speaking for 43 crews who had volunteered for this mission, gave the same answer. "Yes, Captain. Let's bring them home." On the surface of Kethvar, Elder Silthera watched the human ships take position in orbit. They were crude compared to the sleek vessels of the major galactic powers. Their hulls were patched and modified, their designs clearly improvised for this mission. But they were here. When the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had calculated that Zephyrian lives weren't worth saving, these young humans had decided otherwise. "Elder," said Kexon, "the humans are requesting permission to begin landing operations." Silthera smiled for the first time in months. "Permission granted. Tell them we're ready." The rescue of Kethvar was about to begin. The first shuttle touched down in the main cave system at dawn on the second day of operations. Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson stepped out onto the rocky floor, his portable atmosphere analyzer beeping wildly as it tried to make sense of the alien air mixture. Behind him, a team of human technicians unloaded equipment while Dr. Sarah Kim, the fleet's xenobiologist, took her first real look at the people they had come to save. The Zephyrians were beautiful in a way that took her breath away. Their crystalline formations caught and reflected the emergency lighting, creating patterns of color that danced across the cave walls. But Sarah could see the signs of malnutrition and radiation sickness. The crystals that should have been bright and clear were dull and cracked. Many of the younger Zephyrians had crystals that had stopped growing entirely. "Dr. Kim," said Elder Silthera, approaching with careful steps. "Welcome to Kethvar." Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture she had learned from the cultural files. "Elder Silthera, we're here to help." "I know," the elder replied, "but I must ask, how many of us can you really save?" Sarah looked around the cavern. She could see thousands of Zephyrians in this cave alone, and according to their surveys, there were hundreds of similar caves across the planet. The numbers were staggering. "All of you," she said simply. "That's why we're here." Elder Silthera's crystals flickered slightly, a sign that Sarah had learned meant surprise or disbelief. "All of us? Do you understand how many people live on this world?" 200 million, give or take, Sarah replied. "We've done the calculations." What Sarah didn't mention was how desperate those calculations were. Every ship in the human fleet was operating far beyond its intended capacity. The Compassion's Edge alone was trying to support 12,000 Zephyrians in spaces designed for 3,000 human passengers. Life support systems were running at maximum output, with no backup options if anything failed. Marcus was discovering the challenges firsthand as he worked to install atmospheric processors in the main evacuation staging area. Zephyrians needed a specific mix of gases that human ships weren't designed to provide. The temperature requirements were different too, and the humidity levels had to be precisely controlled, or the Zephyrians would begin to dehydrate rapidly. "The carbon dioxide levels are still too high," reported engineering specialist Janet Rivera, reading from her handheld scanner. "The Zephyrians can breathe it, but not for extended periods." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. They had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to convert cargo holds into livable spaces. "Can we add another scrubber unit?" "We're already running 6 units per compartment. Any more and we'll overload the power systems. Then we'll have to make do with what we have," Marcus said. "Run the scrubbers in shifts. Cycle the air every 4 hours instead of continuously." It wasn't ideal, but nothing about this mission was ideal. They were making it up as they went along, solving problems with determination and improvisation, rather than proper planning and adequate resources. Dr. Okafor was facing similar challenges in the medical bay. Zephyrian physiology was unlike anything in his experience. Their crystalline structures weren't just decorative. They were part of their respiratory and circulatory systems. Damage to the crystals could be fatal, but the radiation from their dying sun was causing exactly that kind of damage. "The children are the worst affected," he explained to Dr. Kim during a brief break between treatments. "Their crystals are still forming, so they're more susceptible to radiation damage." "We've lost 6 already." Sarah felt her heart clench. They had come here to save lives, but children were dying while they struggled to set up their makeshift medical facilities. "What can we do?" "We need to get them off the planet as fast as possible," Dr. Okafor said. "Every hour they spend here makes their condition worse." But speed was exactly what they didn't have. Each shuttle trip from the surface to the ships in orbit took 2 hours round trip. They could only run 6 shuttles at a time due to the dangerous radiation levels in the upper atmosphere. And each shuttle could only carry about 200 Zephyrians safely. Captain Chen was tracking the numbers from the bridge of the Compassion's Edge. At their current rate, they were evacuating about 2,400 Zephyrians per day. At that pace, it would take over 7 years to evacuate the entire planet. They had maybe 7 months before the planet became completely uninhabitable. "We need to speed up the process," she announced. "During the daily operations meeting, Captain," said Chief Pilot Rebecca Santos, "we're already pushing the shuttles beyond their safety limits. The radiation exposure is eating through our shielding faster than we can replace it. What about larger shuttles? We don't have any. What we have is what we brought." Captain Chen studied the tactical display, showing the positions of all 43 ships in her fleet. "What if we bring the ships closer to the surface?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew that moving the ships into the lower atmosphere would expose them to much higher radiation levels. It would also make them vulnerable to the massive solar flares that the dying star was throwing off with increasing frequency. "Captain," said Dr. Okafor carefully, "that would significantly increase the risk to our crews." "I know," Chen replied, "but it would also cut the shuttle travel time in half. We could double our evacuation rate." Navigator Park pulled up the atmospheric analysis on her screen. "The radiation levels at lower altitude would burn through our hull shielding in about a week. Then we'll rotate ships," Chen decided. "Each ship takes a week in the danger zone, then pulls back to let another ship take over." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only way to increase their evacuation rate without resources they didn't have. The plan went into effect the next day. The freighter New Horizon was the first to drop into the lower atmosphere, its captain volunteering his ship for the most dangerous position. The results were immediate. Shuttle travel times dropped from 2 hours to 45 minutes and the evacuation rate nearly tripled. But the cost was severe. Within 3 days, the New Horizon's hull was showing signs of radiation damage. By the end of the week, her captain was reporting systems failures throughout the ship. "Hull breach on Deck 7, came the report from Captain Rodriguez. "We're sealing the section, but we're going to need to pull back soon." "Understood," replied Captain Chen. "The Golden Dawn is moving into position to replace you." And so it continued, day after day. Ships rotated through the danger zone, their crews accepting the risks because the alternative was leaving people to die. When the Starlight Express lost her main engines to radiation damage, her crew rigged emergency thrusters and continued operating. When the Freedom's Call had her communication systems burned out, she continued evacuations using hand signals and prearranged patterns. Dr. Kim spent most of her time on the planet's surface now, coordinating with Zephyrian leaders and helping to organize the evacuation queues. She had been exposed to so much radiation that Dr. Okafor had ordered her to take medication to prevent radiation sickness, but she refused to leave while there was still work to do. "You're risking your life," Elder Silthara told her one day as they watched another shuttle lift off loaded with refugees. "So are you," Dr. Kim replied. "You could have been on the first shuttle off this planet, but you're still here helping your people." The Elder's crystals flickered, and what Dr. Kim had learned was the equivalent of a smile. "We are alike, your people and mine." "Maybe that's why we're here," Dr. Kim said. "Because we understand what you're going through." As the days passed and the evacuation continued, something unexpected began to happen. Other species started paying attention to what the humans were doing. Not the major galactic powers who were still filing formal protests about human interference, but smaller civilizations and independent groups. The Theta Mining Collective sent a supply ship with spare parts and medical supplies. The Free Traders Alliance diverted 3 cargo haulers to help with transportation. A religious group called the Compassionate Order sent a hospital ship with advanced medical equipment. "Why are they helping now?" Captain Chen asked during one of her briefings with Elder Silthara. "Because you showed them it was possible," the Elder replied. "For months everyone said saving us was impossible. But you came anyway. You proved that impossible just means no one has tried hard enough yet." Chen nodded, but she knew they were still racing against time. They had evacuated nearly half the Zephyrian population, but their ships were breaking down faster than they could repair them. Several vessels had been forced to return to human space for emergency repairs, reducing their evacuation capacity. And then the long-range sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. A massive solar flare was building on the far side of Kethvar's sun, larger than anything they had seen before. When it hit, it would create a radiation storm that would kill every living thing on the planet's surface within hours. They had perhaps 6 days before it reached Kethvar. And there were still over 80 million Zephyrians waiting for rescue. The emergency meeting was held in the main conference room of the Compassion's Edge, but most of the participants attended virtually from their ships scattered throughout the Kethvar system. Captain Chen looked at the faces on her screen, all showing the same mixture of exhaustion and determination that she felt in her own bones. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I'll get straight to the point. Our solar observation teams have confirmed that the flare building on the far side of the star is the largest we've seen. When it reaches this side of the system, it will create a radiation storm that will penetrate deep into the planet's crust." Dr. Sarah Kim, attending from the surface, spoke up from her position in the main cave system. "How deep, Captain?" "Deep enough to reach the caves where the remaining Zephyrians are sheltering," Chen replied grimly. "Our estimates suggest that any living thing on or near the planet's surface will be killed within 6 to 8 hours of the flare's arrival." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. After weeks of desperate work, they had managed to evacuate 160 million Zephyrians, but that left 40 million still on the planet, and now they had less than 6 days to save them all. Captain Rodriguez of the New Horizon, his ship still bearing radiation scars from his time in the danger zone, was the first to speak. "What's our current evacuation rate?" "With our remaining operational ships, we're moving about 180,000 people per day," replied Chief of Operations Lisa Park. "At that rate, we need at least 220 days to evacuate everyone who's left." "We have 6 days," Chen said simply. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. There was no way to evacuate 40 million people in 6 days with their current resources. Even if every ship worked perfectly and nothing went wrong, they simply didn't have enough transportation capacity. "There has to be something we can do," said Dr. Okafor from the medical bay. "Some way to shield them from the radiation." Chief Engineer Thompson shook his head. "The caves will provide some protection, but not enough. This flare is going to be massive. We're talking about radiation levels that will cook anything organic, even underground." Captain Chen looked at the tactical display showing the positions of all their ships. After weeks of constant operations, the fleet was breaking down. 7 ships had been forced to return to human space for emergency repairs. 3 more were operating on backup systems only. The remaining 33 vessels were all showing signs of stress and damage. "Ma'am," came a voice from her communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command." Chen's heart sank. She had been dreading this call. "Put it through." The screen showed Admiral Harrison, the military leader who had reluctantly approved the rescue mission. Behind him, Chen could see several civilian officials, including some she recognized from the Emergency Council. "Captain Chen," Admiral Harrison began, "our long-range sensors have detected the solar flare you're dealing with. We're ordering immediate evacuation of all human personnel from the Kethvar system. Sir, we still have 40 million Zephyrians on the planet. Captain, I understand your concern for the civilians, but the safety of human personnel must be our priority. You've already saved 160 million lives. That's more than anyone thought possible." Chen felt anger rising in her chest. "Sir, we didn't come here to save most of them. We came here to save all of them." "Captain," interrupted one of the civilian officials, "you must understand the larger picture. Earth cannot afford to lose its entire rescue fleet and 50,000 crew members. We need those ships and people for the defense of human space." "The defense of human space?" Chen repeated. "From who?" "The Galactic Federation has filed formal complaints about human interference in their territory," the official continued. "The Altrurian Empire has moved several battle groups to the border of human space. Our unauthorized rescue operation has created a diplomatic crisis." Chen looked around at her crew, all of whom were listening to this conversation. She could see the anger in their faces, the same anger she felt. "Sir," she said carefully, "are you ordering me to abandon 40 million civilians to save our diplomatic relationships?" "Captain," Admiral Harrison said with obvious discomfort, "I'm ordering you to withdraw to a safe distance and evacuate human personnel before the radiation storm hits." "That's a direct order." Chen stared at the screen for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited to see what she would do. She thought about the Zephyrian children she had seen in the medical bay, their crystals dimmed by radiation sickness. She thought about Elder Silthera, who had spent every day helping coordinate the evacuation even though she could have been on one of the first ships to safety. "Admiral," she said finally. Request denied. The screen erupted in shocked voices. Admiral Harrison held up his hand for silence.
Captain, you cannot refuse a direct order from Earth Command. Sir, with respect, I took an oath when I joined the Space Service.
I swore to protect innocent life and to uphold the values of humanity. I won't abandon 40 million people to protect our political relationships. Captain Chen, the Admiral said, his voice hard. If you refuse this order, you'll be court-martialed. Your crew will be court-martialed. Your careers will be over. Chen looked at her crew again. Chief Pilot Santos gave her a slight nod. Dr. Okafor was smiling grimly. Even young Ensign Park, fresh out of the academy, looked determined. Admiral, Chen said, I'll take that risk. We're staying. She cut the transmission before anyone could respond. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Kim's voice came through from the planet's surface. Captain, did you just tell Earth Command to go to hell? More or less, Chen replied. Good, Dr. Kim said simply. But defying orders wouldn't solve their immediate problem. They still had 40 million people to evacuate and no way to do it in the time they had available. Captain, said Chief Engineer Thompson, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work. I'm listening. What if we use our ships as radiation shields? Position them between the planet and the solar flare. Use our hulls to absorb the worst of the radiation. Navigator Park ran quick calculations on her console. The radiation levels would burn through our hulls in minutes. Any crew aboard would be killed almost instantly. Then we evacuate the crews first, Thompson continued. Set the ships on automatic systems. Use them as sacrificial barriers to buy time for more evacuations. Chen considered this. It would mean sacrificing most of their fleet, ships that had cost billions of credits and represented years of human engineering. More importantly, it would mean stranding the rescue fleet in the Kethvar system with no way to get home. How much time would that buy us? She asked. Thompson worked at his console running simulations. If we position all 33 remaining ships correctly, we might be able to reduce the radiation levels on the planet's surface by 60 to 70%. That could extend the survivable time from 8 hours to maybe 24 hours. That's still not enough time to evacuate everyone. No, Thompson agreed, but it might be enough time to get the most vulnerable people to safety. The children, the elderly, the sick, it wasn't a perfect solution. It wasn't even a good solution, but it was the only solution they had. Captain Chen looked around her bridge one more time. These people had followed her across the galaxy to save strangers they had never met. They had worked beyond exhaustion, risked their lives, and defied their own government. Now she was asking them to give up their ships and strand themselves in an alien system. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication channel. This is Captain Chen. I'm about to ask something of you that goes beyond duty, beyond orders, beyond any reasonable expectation. But 40 million people are counting on us, and we're the only hope they have. She explained the plan. Use their ships as radiation shields. Evacuate the crews to the planet's surface. Create enough protection to buy time for a final evacuation effort, using their shuttles and any small craft that could survive the radiation storm. The response was immediate and unanimous. 33 ship captains representing 33 crews who had volunteered for this mission gave the same answer they had given when the rescue began. Yes, Captain. Let's bring them home. On the planet's surface, Elder Silthara received the news with a mixture of gratitude and horror. The humans were willing to sacrifice everything to save her people. Dr. Kim, she said, your people cannot do this. You cannot give up everything for us. Dr. Kim, her skin already showing the effects of radiation exposure, smiled tiredly. Elder, that's what humans do. When someone needs help, we help, even if it costs us everything. But why? Why would you risk so much for strangers? Dr. Kim looked around at the Zephyrians in the cave. Families huddled together, children playing games to distract themselves from their fear, elders telling stories to maintain hope. They weren't so different from humans, really. They loved their families, cared for their children, helped their neighbors. Because you're not strangers, she said. You're people, and people help people. That's what makes us more than just smart animals. The final phase of the evacuation was about to begin. The evacuation of the human crews began 12 hours before the predicted arrival of the solar flare. One by one, the ships of the rescue fleet positioned themselves between Kethvar and its dying star, their crews transferring to shuttles that would take them down to the planet's surface. Captain Maya, Chen was the last to leave the Compassion's edge. She walked through the empty corridors that had been home to thousands of Zephyrian refugees, past the medical bays where Dr. Okafor had worked miracles to save lives, through the converted cargo holds where families had waited for rescue. "Computer," she said to the ship's artificial intelligence, "initiate automatic positioning protocol. Maintain station keeping relative to the planet's surface. All crew evacuation is complete." "Acknowledged, Captain," the computer replied in its calm, emotionless voice. "Automatic systems are now active." "Good luck," Chen smiled sadly. Even the ship's computer seemed to understand what they were doing. She took one last look around the bridge, then sealed it and headed for the shuttle bay. Chief Engineer Thompson was waiting for her with the final shuttle. "Ready, Captain?" he asked. "Ready?" she replied, though she wasn't sure anyone could ever be ready for what they were about to attempt. On the planet's surface, the final phase of the evacuation was unlike anything that had been attempted before. Dr. Sarah Kim coordinated from the main cave system, her portable computer showing the positions of all remaining Zephyrians across the planet. The radiation sickness was affecting her vision now, but she refused to stop working. "Cave System 7 has been cleared," reported one of the human volunteers over the communication system. "Moving to Cave System 8. Cave System 12 is ready for pickup," came another voice. "We have 2,000 refugees waiting at the surface access point." The plan was desperate but simple. With their ships now serving as radiation shields, they had perhaps 24 hours before the stellar radiation broke through and killed everything on the planet. In that time, they had to use every shuttle, every small craft, every piece of flying equipment to move 40 million Zephyrians to the temporary shelters they had established on Kethvar's outer moon. The shuttles were flying constantly now, making the journey from planet to moon every hour. The crews were pushing themselves and their machines far beyond safe limits, but there was no choice. Every minute they delayed meant more Zephyrians would die. Elder Silthera worked alongside the human volunteers, helping to organize the evacuation queues and keep panic from spreading among her people. She could see the exhaustion in the humans' faces, the way they swayed on their feet from fatigue and radiation exposure, but none of them stopped working. "Dr. Kim," she said during a brief break between shuttle departures, "you should evacuate with the next group. Your radiation exposure levels are becoming dangerous." Dr. Kim looked up from her computer, her hands trembling slightly as she typed. "There are still people who need help getting to the pickup points. I can't leave until everyone is accounted for. Dr. Kim, you could die." The human woman smiled, though it was clearly an effort. "Elder, if I die helping save your people, that's a good way to die. If I live knowing I could have saved more people but chose not to, that's a bad way to live." As the hours passed, the radiation shields began to fail. The human ships, designed for deep space exploration and cargo transport, were never meant to absorb the full fury of a dying star. One by one, they began to break apart under the assault. "We've lost the New Horizon," reported Chief Pilot Santos from her shuttle. Hull breach spread through the entire ship. "She's breaking up." Captain Chen, coordinating from the main staging area on the moon, felt each ship loss like a physical blow. These weren't just machines, they were the vessels that had carried her people across the galaxy on their mission of mercy. "The Golden Dawn is reporting critical systems failure," came another report. "Captain Rodriguez says they have maybe 2 hours before complete structural collapse." "Understood," Chen replied. "All shuttles increase pickup frequency. We're running out of time." But even as the ships died protecting them, the evacuation continued. Human shuttle pilots flew mission after mission, their craft overloaded with refugees, held together by determination and improvised repairs. When the Starlight Express finally broke apart, her debris field actually helped by creating additional radiation obstacles. Dr. Okafor, working in the medical facility they had set up on the moon, was treating both humans and Zephyrians for radiation sickness. The human volunteers were showing severe symptoms now, but they refused treatment if it meant delaying care for Zephyrian children. "Doctor," said one of his assistants, "we're running low on radiation medication." "Give what we have to the Zephyrians," he replied without hesitation. "We knew the risks when we came here." On the planet's surface, Dr. Kim was coordinating the evacuation of the last cave system when her portable computer finally died, its circuits fried by radiation exposure. She was working from handwritten notes now, her vision blurred and her hands shaking uncontrollably. Dr. Kim, said Kexhan, the young Zephyrian who had been helping with communications. This is the last group. The final shuttle is coming. She looked around the empty cave that had sheltered thousands of Zephyrians. Bodies of those who hadn't survived lay covered by emergency blankets, but the living were gone, lifted to safety by human shuttle pilots who had risked everything. How many? She asked. All of them, Kexhan replied, his crystals flickering with amazement. Every living Zephyrian on the planet has been evacuated. Dr. Kim sat down heavily on a rock, the magnitude of what they had accomplished finally hitting her. 200 million people. They had saved 200 million people. Dr. Kim, came Captain Chen's voice over the emergency communicator. Final shuttle is 2 minutes out. Are you ready for pickup? Ready, she said, though she could barely stand. The shuttle pilot was Rebecca Santos, who had been flying for 18 hours straight. Her shuttle was damaged, held together with emergency patches and willpower, but she brought it down to the planet's surface one last time. Dr. Kim, she said as she helped the sick woman aboard, congratulations. We did it. We did it, Dr. Kim agreed, then collapsed. The final shuttle lifted off from Kethvar 30 minutes before the solar flare arrived. From orbit, those who could bear to watch saw the planet's surface become a hellscape of radiation and fire. The remaining human ships, those that hadn't already been destroyed, were vaporized instantly. But on the outer moon, in the emergency shelters that had been built in desperate haste, 200 million Zephyrians looked up at the stars and lived. The cost had been enormous. 33 ships destroyed, representing billions of credits and years of human engineering. Nearly 8,000 human personnel dead or dying from radiation exposure. Dr. Sarah Kim among them, finally succumbing to radiation sickness 3 days after the rescue ended. But when Elder Silthera spoke at the memorial service, her words carried across the galaxy. The humans came when no one else would. They saved us when everyone else said it was impossible. They gave their lives for strangers, their ships for people they had never met, their future for our children. They showed the galaxy what it truly means to be civilized. Within a week of the rescue, the political situation had changed completely. The Galactic Federation, embarrassed by their inaction, offered the Zephyrians a new homeworld. The Altrurian Empire donated ships and resources for resettlement. The Nexus Collective established a fund for refugee support. Everyone wanted to be associated with the Kethvar miracle, now that it was a celebrated success. But the Zephyrians never forgot who had come first, when there was no glory to be gained and no profit to be made. Captain Maya Chen, stripped of her rank by Earth Command but celebrated as a hero by the rest of humanity, established a new organization, the Independent Rescue Service. Its mission was simple. When people needed help, they would provide it, regardless of politics or profit. And in the gardens of New Kethvar, the beautiful world the Zephyrians now called home, crystalline trees grew in patterns that spelled out the names of the humans who had died saving them. Children who had never seen Earth played beneath their branches, living proof that sometimes the most important calculations aren't mathematical, they're moral. Elder Silthera, now ancient but still vital, would often bring her great-grandchildren to the memorial garden. When they asked her why the humans had helped when no one else would, her answer was always the same. Because that's what humans do, little ones. When someone needs help, they help. They don't ask what they'll get in return. They don't calculate the cost. They just help because it's the right thing to do. And that's what makes them the most advanced species in the galaxy, even if they don't know it yet. The trees rustled in the wind, their crystal leaves catching the light of a healthy sun, and the children played in the garden built by human sacrifice, growing up in a world made possible by those who refused to accept that saving everyone was impossible. Because sometimes, impossible just means no one has cared enough to try.